The security line at LAX moved like molasses, and Sophia's arms ached from carrying both 18-month-old twins. Little Camden squirmed against her shoulder while his sister Charlotte slept fitfully in her other arm. The flight to her mother's house in Atlanta couldn't come soon enough. She needed space to think, to figure out why her husband Julian had been so distant lately, why he worked even later hours, why he barely looked at their children anymore. That's when she saw him. Julian stood 30 feet away at the first-class check-in counter, his tall frame unmistakable even from behind. Relief flooded through her chest. He must have changed his mind about the business trip to New York. He could help with the babies, maybe even come with them to visit her mother. She started walking toward him, shifting Charlotte's weight to get a better grip. But as she got closer, her steps slowed. A woman stood beside him. A woman with long auburn hair and a figure that belonged in magazines. Julian lifted the woman's designer luggage onto the scale with the same gentle care he once showed Sophia. The woman laughed at something he said, placing her manicured hand on his arm in a way that made Sophia's stomach drop. The woman turned slightly and Sophia caught sight of her profile. Beautiful. Young. Everything Sophia felt she wasn't anymore after the difficult twin pregnancy that had left her exhausted and struggling to lose the baby weight. Julian's hand moved to the small of the woman's back, fingers splaying possessively across the silk fabric of her dress. It was the same gesture he used to make with Sophia, back when he couldn't keep his hands off her, back when he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. Camden chose that moment to let out a wail that echoed through the terminal. Julian's head snapped around, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Sophia. For a split second, his face went completely white. Then something shifted in his expression. Not guilt. Not shame. Annoyance. The woman followed his gaze, her perfectly painted lips forming a small O of surprise. She said something to Julian, who shook his head and turned back to the counter as if Sophia and the children were strangers who happened to be making noise nearby. Sophia stood frozen, watching her husband of 5 years pretend she didn't exist while he helped another woman check in for what was obviously a romantic getaway. The twins had started crying in harmony now, sensing their mother's distress, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. Other travelers began staring, some with sympathy, others with irritation at the noise. A flight attendant approached to ask if she needed help, but Sophia barely heard her. All she could see was Julian's hand on that woman's back, the intimate way they stood together, the expensive jewelry around the woman's neck that Sophia had never seen before but somehow knew Julian had bought. The woman glanced back at Sophia again, and this time there was something calculating in her gaze. Not sympathy for a struggling mother with crying babies, but assessment. As if she was measuring Sophia and finding her lacking. As if she was the rightful owner of Julian's attention and Sophia was the intruder. Julian finished the check-in process and guided the woman toward the security line for first-class passengers. He didn't look back. Not once. Not even when Charlotte's cries reached a pitch that made several people cover their ears. Sophia finally found her voice. Julian. He stopped walking but didn't turn around. The woman tugged on his arm, clearly wanting to keep moving, but Sophia called his name again, louder this time. When he finally faced her, his expression was cold in a way she'd never seen before. Sophia. What are you doing here? The question hit her like a physical blow. What was she doing here? She was trying to save their marriage. She was giving him space by visiting her mother. She was hoping the distance might help them reconnect. But looking at him now, seeing the way he stood protectively close to this other woman, she realized he didn't want their marriage saved. I'm taking the children to see my mother, she managed to say, her voice shaking. Remember? I told you yesterday. Right? He glanced at his watch. Well, we should probably get going. Our flight boards soon. Our flight. Not his flight. Their flight. Together. The woman stepped forward and Sophia got her first clear look at her. She was probably 25, with perfect skin and the kind of figure that suggested expensive personal trainers and private chefs. Everything about her screamed money and maintenance. Everything Sophia used to be before marriage and motherhood had changed her priorities. Julian, the woman said, her voice honey-sweet with just a hint of impatience. We really should go through security. He nodded, turning back to Sophia. Take care of yourself, Sophia. And the kids. That was it. No explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement that he was destroying their family. He simply walked away with his mistress, leaving Sophia standing in the middle of LAX with 2 crying babies and a shattered heart. But as she watched them disappear through the first-class security line, something hard and cold settled in her chest. Not just heartbreak. Not just betrayal. Something sharper and more focused. Julian thought he could discard her like yesterday's newspaper. He thought he could abandon his children for a younger model. He thought he held all the power because he had the money, the business, the connections. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Sophia shifted the twins in her arms and walked toward her own gate with new purpose. She had a phone call to make to her lawyer friend Rachel. She had documents to gather. She had a war to plan. Julian had made the biggest mistake of his life when he chose that woman over his family. And Sophia was going to make sure he paid for it in ways he never saw coming. The flight to Atlanta felt like the longest 3 hours of Sophia's life. She'd managed to calm the twins with bottles and snacks, but her own mind raced with questions that had no good answers. How long had the affair been going on? How had she missed the signs? And why had Julian looked at her with such cold indifference, as if their 5 years of marriage meant nothing? Her mother, Patricia, was waiting at baggage claim with open arms and a knowing look that suggested she'd suspected something was wrong long before Sophia called from the plane. "Baby girl, you look exhausted," Patricia said, taking Charlotte while Sophia wrestled with Camden and their carry-on bags. And not just tired from traveling. Sophia had inherited her mother's ability to read people, but right now she felt like her intuition had completely failed her. "I saw Julian at the airport. With another woman." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she didn't look surprised. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." "You knew." Sophia stopped walking, causing other passengers to flow around them like water around a rock. "I suspected. The way he started traveling more, the way he stopped asking about the babies when I called. Men who are happy at home don't suddenly become distant from their children." Patricia adjusted Charlotte in her arms. "Come on. Let's get to the house. We have a lot to talk about." The drive to Patricia's comfortable suburban home should have been peaceful. The tree-lined streets and familiar neighborhoods of Sophia's childhood usually brought comfort. But today everything felt different. Tainted. Like she was seeing her whole life through a new lens that revealed ugly truths she'd been blind to. "How long do you think it's been going on?" Sophia asked as they pulled into the driveway. "Honey, that's not the right question." Patricia turned off the engine and faced her daughter. "The right question is, what are you going to do about it?" Inside the house, Sophia finally had a chance to process what she'd seen. While Patricia fed the twins and settled them for naps, Sophia sat at the kitchen table where she'd done homework as a child and tried to make sense of her marriage. The signs had been there. Julian working until 9 or 10 every night. Weekend business trips that seemed to multiply. The way he'd stopped touching her, stopped asking about her day, stopped engaging with Camden and Charlotte beyond the bare minimum required of a father. But she'd made excuses. The business was growing. He was under stress. New parenthood was hard on everyone. She'd convinced herself they just needed to get through this rough patch. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Julian. Hope you made it safely. We'll be out of town for a few days on business." The casual tone made her want to throw the phone across the room. No mention of what had happened at the airport. No acknowledgement that their marriage was in crisis. Just a polite message you'd send to an acquaintance. Sophia stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "We need to talk when you get home." His response came immediately, "Sure. When I'm back." No timeline. No urgency. No concern for what she might be feeling. That's when it truly hit her. Julian wasn't conflicted about the affair. He wasn't struggling with guilt or trying to choose between two women. He'd already made his choice and it wasn't her. Patricia returned to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. "Rachel Torres called me back. She can see you tomorrow morning." Rachel Torres? The divorce attorney I mentioned. Used to work at that big firm downtown before she started her own practice. She's got a reputation for protecting women's interests, especially when there are significant assets involved. Sophia's hands shook as she lifted the coffee cup. "I don't know if I'm ready for divorce attorneys." "Baby, whether you're ready or not, you need to protect yourself and those children. Julian's showing you exactly who he is. Believe him." That evening, while the twins slept peacefully in their portable cribs, Sophia called her best friend Lauren back in Los Angeles. "I've been waiting for you to figure it out," Lauren said after Sophia explained what had happened. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I've seen them together. At that new restaurant downtown. At the coffee shop near his office. She works at one of those high-end art galleries. Victoria something." Victoria. The woman had a name now which somehow made it worse. "How long?" Sophia asked. "I first saw them about 4 months ago. But Sophia, the way they were together, it didn't look new. 4 months. Maybe longer." While Sophia had been struggling with postpartum exhaustion and trying to be the perfect wife and mother, Julian had been building a whole other life. There's something else, Lauren continued. I heard through the grapevine that Julian's been telling people you two are having problems. That you've been distant since the babies came. Like he's already laying the groundwork for the divorce. The betrayal cut deeper than Sophia thought possible. Julian wasn't just cheating. He was rewriting their history, making her the villain in their story. After she hung up, Sophia went to check on the twins. Camden was sprawled on his back, arms flung wide in complete trust that the world would keep him safe. Charlotte slept curled on her side, thumb in her mouth, looking exactly like the baby pictures of Sophia that lined Patricia's hallway. These children deserved better than a father who could walk away without a second glance. They deserved security and stability and love that didn't come with conditions. Sophia's phone rang. Julian's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. Maybe he was calling to explain. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Sophia, I need you to sign some papers when you get back, he said without preamble. My attorney will email them to you. Papers. Just some business stuff. Separating some assets to protect the company. Nothing that affects you directly. The casual way he said it made alarm bells ring in Sophia's head. What kind of business stuff? Technical things. You wouldn't understand the details. Just sign them and send them back, okay? I need them processed quickly. He was trying to hide assets. Even in her emotional state, Sophia recognized the maneuver. Julian thought she was too naive, too trusting, too focused on the children to pay attention to business matters. I'll have my attorney look at them first, she said. There was a pause. Your attorney? Sophia, there's no need to involve lawyers in business matters. There's no need to ask me to sign papers I don't understand either. Another pause, longer this time. When Julian spoke again, his voice had an edge she'd never heard before. Fine. But don't take forever. These things are time-sensitive. He hung up without saying goodbye. Sophia stared at the phone, her last illusions about her marriage finally crumbling. Julian wasn't just unfaithful. He was trying to cheat her financially too. She walked back to the twins' room and stood watching them sleep. Tomorrow she would meet with Rachel Torres. Tomorrow she would start learning exactly what her rights were and what Julian was trying to take from her. But tonight she grieved. Not just for her marriage, but for the man she thought she'd married. For the father she thought her children had. For the life she'd thought they were building together. Julian had made his choice at that airport. Now it was time for Sophia to make hers. Rachel Torres' law office occupied the 20th floor of a sleek downtown Atlanta building, and Sophia felt underdressed in her jeans and simple blouse as she rode the elevator up the next morning. Patricia had insisted on watching the twins, giving Sophia her first child-free hours in months. Rachel herself was nothing like Sophia had expected. Instead of the severe, power-suited woman she'd imagined, Rachel was warm and approachable, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and laugh lines around her eyes. Patricia's told me good things about you, Rachel said, gesturing for Sophia to sit in one of the comfortable chairs facing her desk. And she's told me some not-so-good things about your husband. Sophia had prepared herself to tell the whole story, but Rachel's direct approach made it easier. She explained everything, the airport scene, Julian's coldness, the mysterious papers he wanted her to sign, the affair that had apparently been going on for months. Rachel took notes on a legal pad, asking clarifying questions that revealed years of experience with similar cases. The papers he wants you to sign, Rachel said when Sophia finished. Did his attorney email them yet? Sophia checked her phone. Yes, they came in this morning. I printed them but haven't looked at them yet. Good instinct not to sign them. Let's take a look. Rachel spread the documents across her desk, and even Sophia could see they were extensive. Page after page of legal language that made her head spin. This is what I was afraid of, Rachel said after several minutes of reading. Julian's trying to transfer majority ownership of his company to a trust that he controls exclusively. If you sign this, you'd be giving up any claim to the business you helped him build. I helped him build it? Sophia, you've been married for 5 years. In California, that business is community property. You own half of everything he's accumulated during your marriage. Rachel looked up from the papers. These documents would sign away millions of dollars. The number hit Sophia like a physical blow. Millions? Julian's company is worth approximately $8 million, based on the financial statements I'm seeing here. There's also real estate, investment accounts, and other assets. Your half of the community property is probably worth close to $5 million. Sophia stared at Rachel, unable to process the number. She'd known Julian was successful, but she'd never paid attention to the exact figures. He'd handled all the finances, giving her a credit card and a household budget but never discussing the bigger picture. He's trying to steal from me, Sophia said, the reality finally sinking in. That's exactly what he's doing. And the fact that he's pressuring you to sign quickly suggests he's planning to file for divorce soon. He wants these assets protected before you have legal representation. Rachel pulled out another set of papers. I did some research on your husband's business last night. Sophia, there are some irregularities in his tax filings. Possible fraud. If we investigate further, we might find that Julian has bigger problems than just a messy divorce. The room seemed to spin around Sophia. In 24 hours, her entire life had been turned upside down. Her marriage was over, her husband was trying to cheat her out of millions, and now there was potential criminal activity. What do I do? She asked. First, you don't sign anything. Second, we file for legal separation immediately to protect your interests. Third, we start gathering evidence of the affair and any financial misconduct. Rachel leaned forward. Sophia, I need to ask you something important. Do you want to try to save this marriage, or do you want to protect yourself and your children? The question should have been harder to answer. A day ago, Sophia would have said she wanted to save her marriage. But sitting in that office, learning about Julian's deception and manipulation, she felt something shift inside her chest. I want to protect my children, she said firmly. Good. Because based on what I'm seeing here, Julian's not interested in saving the marriage. He's interested in ending it on his terms, with his assets intact and his reputation protected. Rachel walked Sophia through the next steps. They would file for legal separation within the week. They would hire a forensic accountant to examine Julian's business records. They would document everything about the affair, including the woman's identity and any money Julian had spent on her. One more thing, Rachel said as Sophia prepared to leave. Don't let Julian know you've hired an attorney yet. The longer he thinks you're naive and compliant, the more evidence he might inadvertently give us. Sophia left the law office feeling overwhelmed but also strangely empowered. For the first time in months she had a plan. She had someone fighting for her interests. Her phone rang as she waited for the elevator. Julian again. Did you get those papers? He asked. Yes, they're very complicated. I'm still reading through them. Sophia, they're just standard business documents. My attorney says wives sign these kinds of things all the time to protect the company from liability issues. The lie rolled off his tongue so easily that Sophia wondered how many other lies she'd believed over the years. I want to understand what I'm signing, she said carefully. There's nothing to understand. Just sign them and send them back today. I'm trying to close a big deal, and these papers are holding everything up. More pressure. More urgency. Exactly what Rachel had warned her about. I'll get them back to you soon, Sophia said. Today, Sophia. I need them today. Soon, she repeated and hung up. Her phone immediately rang again, but this time she didn't answer. Julian called 3 more times during the drive back to her mother's house, and each unanswered call felt like a small victory. Patricia was waiting with lunch and eager questions about the meeting. Julian's been trying to steal from me, Sophia said without preamble. Millions of dollars. And there might be tax fraud involved. Patricia set down her coffee cup hard enough to rattle the saucer. That son of a, she caught herself, glancing toward the twins' playpen. What's Rachel's plan? Sophia explained everything while Patricia's expression grew grimmer. You know what this means, don't you? Patricia said when Sophia finished. This affair, these papers, the pressure to sign quickly. Julian's been planning this for months. Maybe longer. He's been systematically setting up your divorce to benefit himself. The calculation behind Julian's actions was almost worse than the affair itself. At least infidelity could be explained by passion or midlife crisis. But this level of planning, this deliberate effort to impoverish his wife and children, revealed a coldness that chilled Sophia to the bone. The twins deserve better, Sophia said, watching Camden try to feed Charlotte a toy block while she giggled and pushed his hand away. They do. And so do you. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed Sophia's hand. Your father and I went through our rough patches, but he never would have tried to leave me and the children with nothing. That's not what good men do. That afternoon, while the twins napped, Sophia did something she hadn't done in years. She looked up Julian's business online, researching his company and his recent deals. What she found made her stomach turn. Julian's company had been accused of cutting corners on construction projects. There were lawsuits pending from clients who claimed shoddy workmanship. And buried in a business journal article, she found a quote from Julian dismissing the complaints as nuisance suits from people trying to get rich quick. The man she'd married would never have spoken about legitimate customer complaints that way. The man she'd married had been passionate about quality and integrity in his work. But maybe she'd never really known that man at all. Maybe the Julian she'd fallen in love with had been just as much a performance as the loving husband act he'd been putting on for months while carrying on his affair. Her phone buzzed with another text from Julian, still waiting for those papers. Getting frustrated. Sophia deleted the message without responding. Let him be frustrated. He was about to learn what real frustration felt like when Rachel's legal filing hit his attorney's desk. The war Julian had started at that airport was about to begin in earnest. And Sophia intended to win. 3 days later, Sophia was back in Los Angeles, armed with Rachel's legal strategy and a new sense of purpose. The house she'd shared with Julian felt different now, like a crime scene she was visiting to gather evidence. Every room held memories that felt tainted by what she now knew. Julian was still traveling, which gave Sophia the freedom to search without interference. She started in his home office, a space she'd rarely entered during their marriage. Julian had always claimed it was too boring, too cluttered with business papers that would only confuse her. Now she understood why he'd really wanted her to stay away. The filing cabinets were locked, but Sophia found the key in the same hiding spot Julian had used for years, taped under his desk drawer. Some habits never changed. What she found inside made her hands shake. Bank statements for accounts she'd never known existed. Credit card bills showing expensive purchases at jewelry stores, high-end restaurants, and luxury hotels. All of it from the past 6 months, all of it clearly not for Sophia or the children. One receipt made her stomach lurch. A $5,000 necklace from Tiffany, purchased just 2 weeks after the twins' first birthday. While Sophia had been celebrating their children's milestone with homemade cake and second-hand toys, Julian had been buying expensive jewelry for his mistress. But the financial infidelity was just the beginning. Deeper in the files, Sophia found correspondence with offshore banks. Account numbers in the Cayman Islands. Investment records showing money being moved systematically out of the country. Julian wasn't just hiding assets from their divorce. He was hiding them from the government. Sophia photographed everything with her phone, following Rachel's instructions to document but not remove any evidence. The scope of Julian's deception was breathtaking. He'd been planning this for at least a year, maybe longer. Her phone rang, making her jump. Julian's name flashed on the screen. "Where are my papers?" he demanded without greeting her. "I'm still reviewing them with my financial advisor," Sophia said, using the cover story Rachel had suggested. "You don't have a financial advisor." "I do now. After what happened at the airport, I realized I need to better understand our finances." There was a long pause. When Julian spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. "What exactly did you think happened at the airport?" Sophia's heart pounded, but Rachel had coached her for this conversation. "I saw you with another woman, Julian. Carrying her bags, touching her like she was your girlfriend." "I'm not stupid. Victoria is a business associate. We were traveling to the same conference." The lie came so easily that Sophia almost admired his skill. If she hadn't seen them together, hadn't witnessed the intimacy between them, she might have believed it. "Business associates don't usually travel together to romantic conferences in Paris," Sophia said. Another pause. "You had me followed." "I didn't need to. Your credit card statements tell the whole story. The hotels, the restaurants, the jewelry. Should I keep going?" The silence stretched so long that Sophia wondered if he'd hung up. "We need to talk," Julian finally said. "Yes, we do. When will you be home?" "Tomorrow night." "And Sophia? Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Julian was warning her not to dig too deep, not to upset whatever plan he had in motion. After he hung up, Sophia continued her search with renewed urgency. In Julian's laptop bag, she found a burner phone she'd never seen before. When she turned it on, it was full of text messages between Julian and Victoria. The messages were intimate, explicit, and dated back 8 months. But more damaging were the ones discussing Sophia and the children. "She's too focused on the babies to notice anything," Julian had written. "Perfect timing for us." Victoria's response made Sophia's blood boil. "Poor thing. Probably thinks she still has a chance at happily ever after." Later messages revealed Julian's timeline. He planned to file for divorce within the month, after the asset transfers were complete. He'd already found an apartment for himself and Victoria. They were discussing vacation plans and future business ventures as if Sophia and the children were minor obstacles to be managed. The most damaging message was from just 3 days ago. My lawyer says if Sophia signs the papers this week, we're in the clear. She'll get the house and some support, but the real money stays with me. Sophia screenshot every message, her anger building with each exchange. Julian wasn't just cheating. He was actively plotting against her, discussing her like she was a business problem to be solved. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Sophia called Rachel with her findings. "Sophia, this is incredible evidence," Rachel said after Sophia described the offshore accounts and text messages. "Julian's not just committing adultery and trying to hide assets. This looks like serious tax fraud. The IRS is going to be very interested in these Cayman Islands accounts." What does that mean for the divorce? It means we have significant leverage. Julian's facing potential criminal charges. The last thing he wants is this information becoming public record in a messy divorce trial. Rachel explained that they could use Julian's criminal exposure to negotiate a much better settlement. Instead of fighting for half of Julian's declared assets, they could demand full disclosure of his hidden wealth and a larger share to ensure the children's security. "But there's something else we need to discuss," Rachel continued. "Julian's going to know you've been investigating when he realizes you have this information. Things might get ugly." "What do you mean?" "Men like Julian don't like losing control. When he realizes you're not the naive, dependent wife he thought you were, he might get aggressive. Not physically," Rachel added quickly, "but he might try to cut off your access to money, change locks, things like that." Sophia looked around the house that had been her home for 3 years. Soon it might not be her home anymore. "I'm stronger than he thinks," she said. "I believe that. But we need to move fast. I'm going to file our papers tomorrow morning, before Julian has a chance to implement whatever plan he's working on." After they hung up, Sophia went to check on the twins one more time. Camden was sleeping with his arms around a stuffed elephant Julian had bought him, back when Julian still pretended to care about being a father. Charlotte clutched a small blanket, her face peaceful in sleep. These children would never know the man Sophia had thought she married. They would grow up knowing the truth about their father, that he was someone who put money and his own desires above their welfare. But they would also grow up knowing their mother was strong enough to protect them, that she was smart enough to fight for their future. That love meant fighting for the people who mattered, not abandoning them for selfish pleasures. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." Her blood ran cold. Julian was having her watched, or Victoria was. The threat was clear. But instead of fear, Sophia felt a surge of determination. Julian had underestimated her completely. He thought she was weak, dependent, easily manipulated. Tomorrow, when Rachel's legal papers arrived at his attorney's office, Julian would learn how wrong he'd been. The woman he'd discarded at that airport was about to become his worst nightmare. And Sophia was going to enjoy every minute of watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. The legal papers hit Julian's attorney's office at exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, and by 10 a.m. Sophia's phone was ringing non-stop. She let every call go to voicemail, following Rachel's advice to let Julian stew in his panic while she gathered more evidence. But first, she had a meeting that Julian knew nothing about. Tom Richardson had been Julian's business partner for 3 years before they'd had a falling out 18 months ago. According to the research Sophia had done, Tom had left Julian's company citing ethical differences, and started his own construction firm. Julian had always described Tom as jealous and bitter, but Sophia was beginning to question everything Julian had ever told her. She found Tom at a coffee shop near his new office, a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes that reminded her of her father. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," Tom said after they'd ordered coffee. "I heard Julian's been telling people you two are having problems." "We are having problems. He's been having an affair, and I found out he's been hiding money offshore." Tom's expression didn't show surprise, which told Sophia everything she needed to know. "I'm not shocked," Tom said carefully. "Julian's changed a lot in the past few years. The man I went into business with wouldn't have done those things." "What happened between you two?" Tom stirred his coffee for a long moment before answering. "Julian started cutting corners. Using cheaper materials, skipping safety inspections, overcharging clients. When I confronted him about it, he said I was being naive. That everyone in the business did it. But you didn't believe that." "I didn't, and I was right." 3 of our former clients are now suing Julian's company for construction defects. One of them is a family whose deck collapsed during their daughter's birthday party. Thank God no one was seriously hurt, but they could have been killed. Sophia felt sick. The Julian she'd married had been passionate about quality construction, about building things that would last. He talked about leaving a legacy of buildings that would still be standing in 50 years. There's something else, Tom continued. Julian's been using undocumented workers and paying them below minimum wage. When I found out about it, that's when I knew I had to leave the company. The picture of Julian that was emerging was of a man Sophia didn't recognize. Greedy, careless, exploitative. Someone who put profit above people's safety and well-being. Tom, I need to ask you something, Sophia said. Would you be willing to testify about what you know? My attorney says Julian's business practices could be evidence of fraud. Sophia, I documented everything before I left the company. I've been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Julian's been getting away with this for too long. Tom agreed to meet with Rachel and provide copies of his documentation. As they parted ways, he squeezed Sophia's shoulder. Julian always said he was lucky to have you, Tom said. Turns out you were the one who was unlucky. On the drive home, Sophia's phone finally stopped ringing. Instead, Julian had switched to text. Call me immediately. We need to talk before this gets out of hand. You're making a mistake that will hurt everyone, including the children. The last text made Sophia's hands clench the steering wheel. Julian was already trying to use the children as leverage, painting himself as the victim when he was the one who had abandoned his family for another woman. She decided to respond to just one message. I'm protecting our children from a father who cares more about money than their welfare. Her phone rang immediately. This time she answered. What the hell do you think you're doing? Julian's voice was raw with rage. I'm making sure Camden and Charlotte have financial security, since their father was planning to steal their inheritance. I wasn't stealing anything. Those were legitimate business transfers. To offshore accounts? Hidden from your wife and the IRS? Julian, I found everything. The Cayman Islands accounts, the texts with Victoria, the receipts for jewelry you bought her while I was taking care of your children. Silence. Then, you went through my private files. Your private files in our shared home office. The home office in the house I own half of, filled with records of the business I own half of. Sophia's voice stayed calm, which seemed to infuriate Julian more. You don't understand business, Sophia. You never have. You're going to destroy everything I've built. I understand fraud. I understand tax evasion. And I understand that you've been planning to divorce me for months while pretending to love me. This isn't about love anymore. This is about protecting what I've worked for. The admission hit Sophia like a slap. Julian had just confirmed that their marriage was over in his mind, that it had been over for a long time. What about what we worked for together? She asked. What about the children we're supposed to protect together? The children will be fine. I'm not abandoning them. You already have. You chose Victoria over them at that airport. You chose your hidden money over their future when you tried to get me to sign those papers. Julian's breathing was audible through the phone. Sophia, you need to stop this legal nonsense and be reasonable. We can work something out privately. The time for working things out privately was before you started cheating and hiding assets. Now we work things out through lawyers. You're going to regret this. When this gets ugly, when it becomes public, when your children grow up knowing their mother destroyed their father's reputation, you're going to wish you'd handled this quietly. Another threat. But this one revealed Julian's biggest fear, public exposure. He didn't want anyone to know about the affair, the tax fraud, the business corruption. His reputation meant everything to him. My children are going to grow up knowing their mother fought for their rights when their father tried to steal from them, Sophia said. They're going to know I was strong enough to protect them. She hung up before Julian could respond. That evening, while the twins played in their high chairs, Sophia received an email from Rachel. Tom Richardson had already provided his documentation, and it was even more damaging than expected. Julian's company was facing potential criminal charges for safety violations, tax evasion, and labor law violations. Julian's in serious legal trouble beyond the divorce, Rachel wrote. This gives us enormous leverage. He can't afford a public trial that would expose all of this. We're in a position to demand full financial disclosure and a very generous settlement. Sophia also found a message from an unexpected source. Lauren, her best friend, had been contacted by Victoria. She wanted me to give you a message, Lauren's text read. She says Julian's told her everything about the divorce, and she wants you to know she's not trying to break up your marriage. She says they're in love and you should let him go gracefully. The audacity of the message took Sophia's breath away. Victoria actually thought she could send messages through mutual friends, painting herself as the innocent party caught between a loving couple's marital problems. Sophia called Lauren immediately. Please tell me you didn't agree to be their messenger, Sophia said. Of course not. I told her exactly what I thought of women who pursue married men with children. But Sophia, she seemed genuinely surprised that you were fighting the divorce. She said Julian told her you were both unhappy and planning to separate anyway. More lies from Julian. He'd been telling Victoria that Sophia was a willing participant in the divorce, that their marriage had been over for months by mutual agreement. He'd painted himself as a man trapped in a loveless marriage rather than a cheating husband who was abandoning his family. Lauren, I need you to do me a favor, Sophia said. If Victoria contacts you again, record the conversation. I want documentation of every lie Julian's been telling her. Absolutely. Sophia, I'm so proud of how you're handling this. The old Sophia would have tried to fix things, would have blamed herself for Julian's cheating. Lauren was right. The old Sophia would have asked what she'd done wrong, how she could be a better wife, whether she could win Julian back. But finding those text messages, discovering the offshore accounts, learning about Julian's business corruption, it had shown her exactly who she was really married to. The man she'd loved had never existed. Julian had been playing a role, and now that he didn't need her anymore, he'd dropped the mask. That night, after the twins were asleep, Sophia sat in the living room that had once felt like home and made a list of everything she wanted from the divorce. Full custody of the children, with Julian paying substantial child support. Half of all marital assets, including the hidden offshore accounts. Spousal support that would allow her to rebuild her career. The house so the children could have stability. Full college funds for Camden and Charlotte. Most importantly, she wanted Julian to face consequences for his crimes. The tax evasion, the business fraud, the exploitation of workers, all of it needed to be exposed. Julian thought he could discard her like yesterday's newspaper and walk away with his fortune intact. He thought she was too weak, too dependent, too focused on the children to fight back effectively. Tomorrow, Rachel would present their demands to Julian's attorney. The war Julian had started was about to escalate, and Sophia was ready for battle. She looked at the engagement ring still on her finger, a modest stone Julian had bought when he was building his business, promising to upgrade it someday when he could afford something bigger. He'd never kept that promise, but now Sophia understood why. He'd been saving his money for another woman's jewelry. Sophia pulled off the ring and set it on the coffee table. Tomorrow she would return it to Julian along with Rachel's settlement demands. The naive, trusting wife Julian had married was gone forever. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth and exactly what she was fighting for. And Julian was about to discover that he'd underestimated her in the most expensive way possible. Rachel's settlement demands arrived at Julian's attorney's office on a Thursday morning, and by Friday afternoon, Sophia had her answer. Julian wanted to meet in person to discuss terms like civilized adults. It's a trap, Rachel warned during their phone call. He wants to manipulate you face to face, make you feel guilty, convince you to accept less than you deserve. I know, Sophia replied. But I want to see him try. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a conference room Rachel had booked at a downtown hotel. Julian arrived with his attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Blackwood who looked like she could eviscerate opponents with her briefcase. Julian looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Good, Sophia thought. Let him suffer a little. Sophia, he said, attempting his old charming smile. You look beautiful. Motherhood suits you. The compliment felt like an insult after everything she'd learned about him. Let's get to business. Patricia Blackwood spread papers across the conference table. Mrs. Bennett, your demands are unreasonable. Half of the offshore accounts? Full custody? Spousal support for 10 years? Your husband is willing to be generous, but not to the point of financial ruin. My husband committed tax fraud and hid marital assets, Sophia replied calmly. He's lucky I'm not demanding criminal prosecution. Julian leaned forward. Sophia, we had something beautiful together. We created 2 amazing children. Don't destroy that legacy because you're angry about Victoria. The manipulation was so transparent that Sophia almost laughed. I'm not angry about Victoria, Julian. I'm angry about you trying to steal from your own children. I would never. You already did. Sophia pulled out her phone and showed him screenshots of his text messages. Here's where you told Victoria I was too focused on the babies to notice anything. Here's where you discussed hiding assets from me. Here's where you called our children obstacles to your happiness. Julian's face went white. Patricia Blackwood looked furious that her client had been stupid enough to put incriminating statements in writing. Those messages are taken out of context, Julian said weakly. Really? What context makes it okay to call your wife stupid and your children burdens? Rachel placed a thick folder on the table. Mr. Bennett, we have documentation of your tax evasion, your business fraud, and your systematic hiding of marital assets. We also have testimony from former business partners about your illegal labor practices and safety violations. You can't use that, Patricia said quickly. Business disputes are separate from family law. Criminal activity isn't separate from anything, Rachel replied. And when that criminal activity involves hiding assets from a spouse, it becomes very relevant to divorce proceedings. Julian stood up abruptly. I need to speak with Sophia privately. That's not advisable, both attorneys said simultaneously. 5 minutes, Julian insisted. Please. Against Rachel's advice, Sophia agreed. They stepped onto the hotel's outdoor balcony, the city spreading out below them. Sophia, this isn't you, Julian said, his voice taking on the intimate tone he'd once used to make her feel special. You're not vindictive. You're not someone who destroys families over hurt feelings. You're right. I'm not vindictive. I'm protective. There's a difference. I made mistakes. I admit that. But we can fix this privately without lawyers, without dragging our personal business through the courts. Fix this how? By me pretending I don't know about Victoria? By signing papers that steal from our children? By letting you get away with tax fraud? Julian moved closer, and Sophia caught a whiff of his cologne, the same scent she'd once found irresistible. Now it made her feel sick. I love those children, he said. I would never do anything to hurt them. You already have. You chose your affair over their stability. You chose hidden money over their future. You chose Victoria over their mother. Victoria has nothing to do with this. Victoria has everything to do with this. You've been planning this divorce around your relationship with her. You've been moving money to protect it from our settlement. You've been telling her lies about me to justify abandoning your family. Julian's mask slipped for a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Sophia, you need to accept reality. Our marriage is over. Has been for months. We can end this amicably, or we can destroy each other in court. Your choice. It stopped being my choice when you started cheating and stealing. Now it's a legal matter. They returned to the conference room, where Julian's attorney had prepared a counteroffer. It was insulting. Limited custody, minimal spousal support, and no access to the offshore accounts. This is what happens when you try to be reasonable with unreasonable people, Rachel said after Julian and his attorney left. He actually thinks he can lowball you. What's our next move? We file for full financial discovery. Force him to disclose every account, every investment, every asset. And we contact the IRS about those Cayman Islands accounts. That weekend, while Julian was presumably with Victoria, Sophia did something that felt both therapeutic and strategic. She changed every lock in the house. When Julian tried to use his key on Monday morning, he found himself locked out of what had been his home. Her phone rang immediately. You can't lock me out of my own house, Julian said. It's not your house. It's our house and I live here with our children. If you want access, you can arrange it through your attorney like any other separated parent. Sophia, this is getting ridiculous. I just want to get some clothes. You should have thought of that before you moved in with Victoria. The silence on the other end told her she'd hit her target. Julian hadn't expected her to know about the apartment he'd rented for himself and his mistress. I'll have my attorney contact yours, he finally said. Good. That's how we're handling everything from now on. Later that day, Sophia received an unexpected visitor, Victoria herself. The other woman looked even more stunning in person than she had at the airport. Tall, elegant, with the kind of polish that came from expensive salons and personal shoppers. She stood on Sophia's doorstep like she belonged there. We need to talk, Victoria said. No, we don't. Sophia started to close the door, but Victoria put her hand out to stop her. Please. Just 5 minutes. Woman to woman. Against her better judgment, Sophia stepped outside, closing the door behind her to keep the twins from seeing this confrontation. Julian told me you were separated, Victoria said without preamble. He said you both agreed the marriage was over, that you were just working out details. And you believed him? I had no reason not to. He seemed genuinely unhappy, genuinely ready to move on. I'm not a homewrecker, Sophia. I would never have gotten involved with a married man who was trying to save his marriage. The sincerity in Victoria's voice was almost convincing. Almost. Victoria, Julian was lying to you. We were never separated. We never discussed divorce. I found out about the affair when I saw you two at the airport. Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. That's not, he said you knew about us. He said you were okay with it. Does it look like I'm okay with it? I'm fighting for custody of our children and half of everything he owns. Does that sound like someone who agreed to an amicable divorce? Victoria stared at her for a long moment. He lied to me. He lied to both of us. The question is what you're going to do about it now that you know the truth. I love him, Victoria said quietly. Then you love a man who abandons his children and lies to the women in his life. That's your choice to make. Victoria turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. If I'd known he was lying about your marriage. You would have done what? Walked away. Victoria didn't answer, which was answer enough. After she left, Sophia went inside and held her children a little tighter. Camden babbled happily while Charlotte tried to eat her own foot, both of them blissfully unaware that their father had chosen another woman over their family. But they would be okay. Sophia would make sure of that. Julian might have abandoned them, but they would never lack for love, security, or opportunity. That evening Rachel called with news. Julian's attorney wants to negotiate. Apparently, our threat to involve the IRS got their attention. What are they offering? 50% more than their initial lowball offer. Still not what you deserve, but it's progress. What do you think? I think we hold firm. Julian's more desperate than he's letting on. The tax fraud alone could send him to prison. He needs this settled quickly and quietly. Sophia agreed to continue the fight. Julian had made his choice when he decided to cheat and steal. Now he would live with the consequences. The naive woman he'd married was gone forever. In her place was someone who knew exactly what she was worth and exactly what she was fighting for. And Julian was about to learn that underestimating Sophia Bennett had been the most expensive mistake of his life. 2 weeks after Victoria's unexpected visit, Sophia received a call that changed everything. Tom Richardson had more information about Julian's business information that made the tax evasion look like a parking ticket. I've been contacted by federal investigators, Tom told her over coffee. Julian's company is under investigation for defrauding government contracts. The safety violations, the substandard materials, the worker exploitation, it was all part of a bigger scheme to maximize profits on public works projects. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. How big are we talking? Millions in fraudulent charges. Projects that were supposed to build schools and community centers but were built with materials that could fail catastrophically. The investigation started when that deck collapsed at the birthday party, but it's expanded to cover 3 years of contracts. The scope of Julian's criminality was staggering. This wasn't just a greedy businessman cutting corners. This was systematic fraud that put children and families at risk. Tom, if Julian goes to prison, what happens to his assets? The government could seize everything. His company, his properties, his accounts, including the offshore ones you found. Criminal forfeiture is a powerful tool. Sophia's mind raced. If the federal government seized Julian's assets, there might be nothing left for the children's support. She needed to act fast to protect Camden and Charlotte's financial future. But first, she had a more immediate problem. Julian had apparently learned about the federal investigation, because he was taking desperate measures. Her credit cards had been canceled. The joint bank accounts had been emptied. When she tried to access their safe deposit box, she was told Julian had already cleaned it out. He's trying to force you into accepting his terms, Rachel explained during an emergency meeting. Classic financial abuse. Make you desperate so you'll take whatever he offers. Can he do that legally? Not without consequences. But it takes time to get court orders, and Julian's betting you don't have time. He thinks you'll panic and give in. But Julian had miscalculated again. Sophia had been preparing for this possibility. She'd opened her own bank account and had been systematically documenting every asset. She had savings Julian didn't know about, money she'd put aside from her freelance graphic design work over the years. More importantly, she had something Julian desperately needed: information that could keep him out of federal prison. Rachel, what if we offered to cooperate with the federal investigation in exchange for better divorce terms? Rachel's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. Julian needs you to stay quiet about what you know. If you testify about the offshore accounts and the hidden assets, it strengthens the government's case against him. They crafted a new strategy. Instead of just fighting for divorce terms, they would position Sophia as a cooperating witness in the federal investigation. Julian's desperation to keep her quiet would give them enormous leverage. The plan worked faster than Sophia had dared hope. Within 24 hours of Rachel contacting Julian's attorney about Sophia's willingness to cooperate with federal investigators, Julian was demanding an emergency meeting. This time he came alone. "Sophia, we need to end this," he said, looking haggard and desperate. "Name your terms." "My terms haven't changed. Full custody, half of all assets including the offshore accounts, substantial spousal support, and college funds for the children." "The offshore accounts don't exist." Sophia slid a folder across the table. "Account numbers, bank statements, transaction records. I found everything, Julian. And now the FBI has copies." Julian's face crumbled. "You went to the FBI?" "They came to me. Tom Richardson told them about our divorce and they wanted to know what I knew about your business practices. I was very cooperative." It was a slight exaggeration. The FBI hadn't contacted her yet, but Julian didn't need to know that. "Sophia, if you testify against me, you'll destroy the children's father." "Is that what you want?" "I want my children to have a father who isn't a criminal. Since that's apparently impossible, I want them to have financial security and a mother who taught them that actions have consequences." Julian stood up and began pacing. "There has to be another way. I'll give you the house, double the child support, whatever you want. Just don't cooperate with the investigation." "Why shouldn't I?" "You committed the crimes, Julian. You defrauded the government. You put children at risk with your substandard construction. You stole from your own family. Why should I protect you from the consequences?" "Because once this becomes public, everyone will know. The children will grow up with people knowing their father is a criminal. The children will grow up knowing their mother had integrity. That she did the right thing even when it was hard." Julian sat back down, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "What do you want?" "Everything I asked for originally. Plus, Julian, I want Victoria gone. Completely. No contact with her while you're dealing with your legal problems. You can't control who I see. I can if you want me to stay quiet about what I know. Victoria was part of your asset hiding scheme. Her gallery received payments from your offshore accounts. She's as guilty as you are." It was another bluff. Sophia had no evidence Victoria was involved in the financial crimes, but Julian's expression told her she'd guessed correctly. "How did you?" Julian caught himself. "I told you I found everything. Bank records, payment transfers, email correspondence. Victoria helped you hide assets, which makes her an accomplice to fraud." Julian buried his head in his hands. "She didn't know it was illegal. I told her it was just international business transactions. Then she'll be fine if she stays away from you in this investigation. Unless you want her dragged into federal court as a co-conspirator." The threat worked. Julian agreed to all of Sophia's divorce terms in exchange for her discretion about Victoria's involvement. Within a week, the settlement was finalized. Sophia received full custody of the twins, half of all marital assets including the offshore accounts, 5 years of substantial spousal support, and the family home. The children's college funds were established and protected from any future legal judgments against Julian. Most importantly, Sophia had her freedom and her self-respect. Julian still faced the federal investigation, but that was his problem now. He'd made his choices, and Sophia was no longer responsible for protecting him from the consequences. On the day the divorce was finalized, Sophia stood in the courthouse holding her settlement documents and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine happiness. Julian had thought he could discard her and steal from their children. He believed she was too weak and naive to fight back effectively. Instead, she'd outmaneuvered him at every turn. She protected her children's future, secured her own financial independence, and ensured that Julian faced justice for his crimes. The man who'd carried another woman's bags at the airport while his wife held their twins had lost everything that truly mattered. And Sophia had won more than money. She'd won her freedom, her dignity, and her future. The best revenge, she realized, wasn't just surviving Julian's betrayal. It was thriving in spite of it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Sophia's new life was taking shape beautifully. She'd launched her own graphic design business, working with clients who appreciated her creativity and attention to detail. The twins were thriving in their routine, and Sophia had found peace in her independence. Then Rachel called with news that made everything even better. "Julian's been arrested," Rachel said without preamble. "Federal charges for contract fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The investigation you helped with finally paid off." Sophia felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that justice was being served. Sadness that her children's father had chosen this path. And if she was honest, a small sense of satisfaction that Julian was finally facing consequences for his actions. "What happens now?" she asked. "He's looking at serious prison time. 5 to 10 years if he's convicted on all charges. His assets are being seized by the government, except for what's already been transferred to you and the children through the divorce settlement. It was a bitter irony. Julian's attempt to hide assets during their divorce had actually protected the children's inheritance from government seizure. His illegal schemes had ultimately benefited the family he tried to cheat. And Victoria? No charges filed against her. Looks like she really was an unwitting participant. She's cooperating with investigators and has cut all ties with Julian. That evening, while the twins played in the living room of the house that was now truly theirs, Sophia reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. A year ago, she'd been a naive wife who trusted her husband completely. Now she was a successful businesswoman who'd learned to trust herself. Her phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen, probably his one allowed call from jail. She almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Sophia. Julian's voice was small, defeated. I need help. I'm not your wife anymore, Julian. I'm not responsible for helping you. I know. But I'm asking anyway. My lawyer says I need character witnesses for the sentencing hearing. People who can testify that I'm not the monster the prosecution is making me out to be. The request was so audacious that Sophia almost laughed. You want me to be a character witness? After you cheated on me, tried to steal from our children, and committed federal crimes. I'm still the father of your children. If I go to prison for 10 years, Camden and Charlotte will grow up without a father. They've been growing up without a father since you chose Victoria over them. At least now there's an official reason for your absence. Sophia, please. I'm begging you. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes. Sophia's voice rose. Julian, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to hide money from your family. You chose to defraud the government. You chose to put children at risk with shoddy construction. Those weren't mistakes. They were decisions that revealed who you really are. I'm not a bad person. I just got caught up in trying to provide for my family. Don't you dare claim you did any of this for your family. You did it for yourself. For your ego. For your greed. For Victoria. There was a long silence. When Julian spoke again, his voice was broken. I've lost everything. My company, my money, my freedom. Victoria won't even take my calls. I have nothing left. You have what you chose, Julian. You chose Victoria over your wife. You chose money over integrity. You chose crime over honesty. You have exactly what you earned. What about the children? What am I supposed to tell them when they ask why Daddy isn't around? I'll tell them the truth. That their father made choices that hurt people, and sometimes when adults make bad choices, they have to face consequences. It's called accountability, something you never learned. Julian started to cry, the sound pathetic and manipulative even through the phone. Please, Sophia. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. If I could take it all back. But you can't. That's the point of consequences, Julian. They're permanent. Sophia hung up and immediately blocked his number. She was done being manipulated by his self-pity. 2 weeks later, Julian was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The news made the local papers, complete with photos of Julian in handcuffs and details about his crimes. Sophia kept the newspaper clipping, not out of malice, but as a reminder of how far she'd come. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. I'm sorry for everything. You were right about him. Sophia deleted the message without responding. Victoria's regrets weren't her problem either. That night, Sophia sat on the deck Julian had once planned to renovate, watching Camden and Charlotte play in the backyard. They were happy, healthy children who would grow up knowing their mother was strong enough to protect them from anyone who tried to hurt them, even their own father. Lauren stopped by with wine and congratulations on Julian's sentencing. I have to ask, Lauren said as they watched the twins chase bubbles. Do you ever feel bad about how this all turned out? Sophia considered the question seriously. I feel bad that my children's father turned out to be a criminal. I feel bad that he chose greed over his family. But do I feel bad that he's facing consequences for his actions? No, not at all. Some people would say you were vindictive. That you could have been more forgiving. Some people would be wrong. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse or enabling criminal behavior. I forgave Julian for the sake of my own peace, but that doesn't mean he should escape justice. Lauren raised her wine glass. To Sophia Bennett, the strongest woman I know. To learning that I was stronger than I thought, Sophia corrected. As they clinked glasses, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with her choices. She'd fought for her children, protected their future, and ensured that justice was served. Julian had believed she was too weak to fight back, too naive to understand his schemes, too dependent to survive without him. He'd been spectacularly wrong on all counts. The woman he'd discarded at that airport had turned out to be his worst nightmare and his children's greatest protector. And that woman was just getting started. 2 years had passed since Julian's sentencing, and Sophia's life had transformed beyond recognition. Her graphic design business was thriving, with a team of 5 employees and clients ranging from local nonprofits to national corporations. The twins, now 3.5, were bright, confident children who knew they were loved unconditionally. Most importantly, Sophia had built a life based on her own values and choices, not someone else's manipulation or control. She was reviewing quarterly profit reports when her assistant knocked on her office door. "There's a woman here to see you," Janet said. "Says her name is Patricia Blackwood and it's about Julian." Sophia's blood ran cold. Patricia Blackwood had been Julian's divorce attorney, the sharp-eyed woman who'd tried to intimidate Sophia into accepting an inadequate settlement. What could she possibly want now? "Send her in," Sophia said, steeling herself for whatever manipulation was coming. Patricia entered looking very different from the polished attorney Sophia remembered. Her expensive suit was replaced by simple business attire, and her aggressive demeanor had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Mrs. Bennett, thank you for seeing me," Patricia said, taking the chair Sophia gestured to. "I have something I need to tell you and I'm not sure you're going to like it." "I'm listening." "Julian's been writing to me from prison. Not for legal advice. Our attorney-client relationship ended when he couldn't pay my fees. He's been writing letters about you and the children." Sophia's hands clenched involuntarily. "What kind of letters?" "Obsessive ones. He talks about how you destroyed his life, how you turned his children against him, how he's going to make things right when he gets out." "Mrs. Bennett, I'm concerned about your safety." The words hit Sophia like ice water. "Are you saying Julian's threatening me?" "Not explicitly. But the tone of his letters. Julian doesn't take responsibility for anything that happened. In his mind, you're the villain who ruined his perfect life. I've seen this pattern before. In high-conflict divorces, the narcissistic personality often fixates on the ex-spouse as the source of all their problems." Patricia pulled out a folder and slid it across Sophia's desk. "I brought copies of some of the letters. You should read them and decide if you want to involve law enforcement." Sophia's hands shook as she opened the folder. Julian's familiar handwriting filled page after page, but the content was chilling. "Sophia thinks she won, but she has no idea what's coming when I get out. She stole my children, my money, my future. She needs to understand there are consequences for destroying a man's life. The twins probably don't even remember me now. Sophia's probably poisoned them against me, told them lies about their father. I'll have to re-educate them about who the real villain is in this story. 8 years feels like forever, but it's not. I'm learning patience in here. Learning to plan. Sophia got lucky once because I was unprepared. That won't happen again." Sophia set the letters down with trembling hands. The Julian who'd written these words wasn't the charming businessman she'd married or even the cold manipulator she'd divorced. This was someone consumed by rage and blame, someone who saw her as an enemy to be defeated rather than the mother of his children. "How many letters like this have there been?" she asked. "Dozens. I stopped reading them after the first few, but I kept them all. Mrs. Bennett, I need to be honest with you about something else. I should have warned you about Julian's personality during the divorce proceedings." "What do you mean?" Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "I've been practicing family law for 20 years. I've seen hundreds of divorces, including many involving infidelity and financial deception. But Julian was different. Most clients show some remorse, some acknowledgement of their role in the marriage's failure. Julian never did. He genuinely believed he was the victim in your divorce. You're telling me this now because I'm retiring from family law. I can't represent people like Julian anymore, knowing what I know about how these cases can escalate. And because I think you deserve to know what you might be dealing with when he gets out." Sophia's mind raced. Julian wouldn't be released for another 6 years, but suddenly that felt like no time at all. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "Document everything. Keep copies of these letters. If Julian contacts you or the children directly, report it immediately. It would be a violation of his supervised contact order. Consider a restraining order that would take effect upon his release. And Mrs. Bennett, consider relocating." "Relocating?" "Julian knows where you live, where you work, where the children go to school. He's had 8 years to think about all of this, and these letters suggest he's not thinking rationally." After Patricia left, Sophia sat in her office trying to process this new threat. She'd thought Julian was out of their lives permanently. She'd assumed prison would either reform him or keep him occupied with his own survival. Instead, he'd been nurturing his resentment and planning his revenge. That evening, Sophia called Rachel Torres for advice. "I've been wondering when this would surface," Rachel said after Sophia explained about the letters. "Narcissists like Julian rarely accept responsibility. In their minds, they're always the victim of someone else's actions. What are my legal options? We can file for a permanent restraining order that takes effect when Julian is released. We can also petition the court to modify his parental rights based on these threatening communications. A judge might terminate his custody rights entirely. Would that hold up? With this evidence? Absolutely. Julian's letters show he's more interested in punishing you than in being a father to his children. No judge is going to force children to have contact with a parent who threatens their primary caregiver." That night, after putting the twins to bed, Sophia made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. She wasn't going to run from Julian's threats. She wasn't going to uproot her children's lives because their father couldn't accept responsibility for his actions. Instead, she was going to eliminate the threat permanently. Sophia called Tom Richardson, who had become a trusted friend since testifying against Julian. "Tom, I need your help with something," she said. "Julian's been writing threatening letters from prison. I want to make sure he can never hurt me or the children when he gets out." "What do you have in mind?" "I want to ensure his parental rights are terminated. I want restraining orders. And Tom, I want him to know that if he comes anywhere near us, he'll face consequences worse than prison." "Sophia, you can't threaten him. That would make you the criminal." "I'm not talking about threats. I'm talking about documentation, legal protection, and making sure everyone who matters knows exactly what kind of man Julian really is." Over the next month, Sophia built an impenetrable legal wall around herself and the children. The restraining order was granted based on Julian's letters. His parental rights were terminated due to his criminal convictions and threatening behavior. Most importantly, Sophia ensured that Julian's probation officer would be aware of his fixation on his ex-wife and children. But Sophia's masterstroke was something Julian would never see coming. She kept in touch with some of Julian's former employees, people who'd lost their jobs when his company was shut down. Many of them had families, mortgages, and financial obligations that Julian's crimes had jeopardized. Sophia organized them. "When Julian gets out of prison," she told the group gathered in her conference room, "he's going to try to rebuild his life. He might try to start a new company, find new investors, work on new projects. But everyone in this industry should know what kind of man they'd be dealing with." She'd created a comprehensive dossier of Julian's crimes, his threatening letters, his abandonment of his children, and his treatment of employees. When Julian was released, this information would be shared with every construction company, every potential investor, every professional organization in their industry. Julian wouldn't just be an ex-con looking for work. He'd be a known quantity, someone whose character and business practices were thoroughly documented. "The best part," Tom said after reviewing Sophia's plan, "is that it's all true. You're not defaming him or spreading lies. You're just making sure people have accurate information about who they're dealing with." 3 months later, Sophia received word that Julian had been transferred to a minimum security facility, a sign that his release was getting closer. But instead of fear, she felt calm confidence. Julian had spent years in prison nurturing his anger and planning his revenge. But Sophia had spent those same years building something much more powerful. A life where Julian was irrelevant. She had a successful business, financial independence, beautiful children, and a network of people who respected and supported her. She had legal protections, professional allies, and the knowledge that she'd done everything possible to keep her family safe. Most importantly, she'd learned that she was strong enough to handle whatever Julian might throw at her. The woman who'd been devastated by his betrayal at the airport no longer existed. In her place was someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't be intimidated by a bitter ex-husband's delusions of revenge. Julian thought he was planning a comeback. What he didn't realize was that he was already defeated. He'd lost his children, his reputation, his fortune, and his freedom. And when he was finally released, he'd discover that he'd also lost any power to hurt the woman he blamed for his downfall. Sophia had won this war before Julian even realized it was over. 5 years after Julian's sentencing, on a bright Saturday morning in spring, Sophia stood in her kitchen making pancakes for Camden and Charlotte, now 8 years old and full of energy. The twins had no memory of their father. He was just a name on legal documents and an explanation for why some of their friends had dads who lived at home. "Mom, when are Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa coming over?" Charlotte asked, bouncing in her chair. "Soon, sweetheart. They're bringing the twins' cousins to play. Tom Richardson had become more than a business partner and friend. Over the past 2 years he'd become family. His relationship with Sophia had grown slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than passion and promises. When Tom had finally asked her to dinner as more than a friend, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Are we still going to the park after breakfast?" Camden asked, syrup somehow ending up in his hair despite Sophia's vigilance. "Absolutely. And tonight we're having dinner at that new restaurant downtown to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" both children asked simultaneously. Sophia smiled, touching the small diamond ring on her left hand. "Tom asked me to marry him and I said yes." The twins erupted in cheers, climbing out of their chairs to hug her. They adored Tom, who treated them like his own children and had never tried to replace the father they'd never really known. "Does this mean Tom will really be our dad?" Charlotte asked. "If you want him to be. Tom would like to adopt you both officially so you'd have the same last name and everything." "Richardson sounds cool," Camden declared. "Can we tell him yes when he gets here?" Sophia laughed, feeling a happiness so complete it still surprised her sometimes. "We can tell him together." As if summoned by their conversation, Tom's truck pulled into the driveway. The twins ran to the window, waving excitedly as Tom and his sister Lisa emerged with her own children. Tom entered the kitchen with the easy confidence of a man who belonged there, kissing Sophia on the cheek and ruffling both twins' hair. "Did you tell them?" he asked quietly. "I told them about the engagement. They want to know if they can call you Dad officially." Tom's face lit up. "Nothing would make me happier." It was a perfect morning, full of laughter and family and plans for the future. So perfect that Sophia almost didn't notice her phone buzzing with an unknown number. Almost. "Sophia Bennett?" The voice was unfamiliar, official. "Yes. This is Officer Martinez with the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm calling about Julian Bennett." Sophia's blood turned to ice. She stepped onto the patio, away from the children's hearing. "What about him?" "He was released from federal prison yesterday. His probation officer tried to contact him this morning for his mandatory check-in, but he didn't show up. We're required to notify you because of the restraining order on file." Sophia's hand tightened on the phone. "Do you know where he is?" "No, ma'am. But we wanted you to be aware. If he contacts you or comes near your residence, call 911 immediately." After hanging up, Sophia stood on her patio trying to process this development. Julian was free, and his first act had been to violate the terms of his probation. That meant he was already breaking the law again, already choosing to prioritize his own agenda over legal requirements. Tom appeared beside her. "Everything okay?" "Julian was released yesterday. He's already violated probation by not checking in with his officer." Tom's expression hardened. "Do you want me to call the security company? Have them increase monitoring on the house?" "Yes. And Tom, I want to tell the children what's happening. Age appropriately, but they should know." They gathered the kids in the living room while Lisa took her children outside to play. "Remember how we've talked about how some adults make bad choices and have to face consequences?" Sophia began. Both twins nodded solemnly. "Your biological father is out of prison now, but he's already made another bad choice by not following the rules he was supposed to follow. Is he going to try to hurt us?" Charlotte asked with the directness only children possessed. "I don't think so," Sophia said honestly. "But if he does try to contact us, we call the police immediately. And if anyone you don't know tries to talk to you at school or anywhere else, you find a teacher or trusted adult right away." "What if he says he's our dad and we should go with him?" Camden asked. Tom knelt down to the children's eye level. "Your real dad is the person who loves you every day, who takes care of you, who puts your needs first. That's not the man who's in trouble with the police. That's me if you'll have me." Both children launched themselves into Tom's arms, and Sophia felt her heart swell with love for this man who'd chosen to protect and cherish not just her, but her children. 3 days passed without incident. Sophia went to work, the children went to school, and life continued normally. The security system Tom had installed provided peace of mind, and the police patrols in their neighborhood had been increased. On Thursday evening, as Sophia was helping Charlotte with homework while Camden built elaborate Lego structures, her phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen. Sophia's first instinct was to ignore the call, but then she remembered Rachel's advice: document everything. She answered but immediately put the call on speaker so Tom could witness whatever Julian might say. "Hello, Julian," she said calmly. "Sophia." Julian's voice was different than she remembered, harder, with an edge that made her skin crawl. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. You're violating the restraining order by calling me." I'm violating a lot of things, Sophia. Might as well add another one to the list. The casual way he admitted to breaking the law sent chills down Sophia's spine. Julian, where are you? Close enough to see my children playing in our backyard. Close enough to see you've replaced me with another man. Close enough to remind you that some debts never get paid in full. Tom was already on his phone with 911, speaking in low, urgent tones. Julian, I need you to listen carefully, Sophia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. If you come near this house, if you try to contact the children, if you do anything to threaten this family, you will go back to prison for the rest of your life. Prison doesn't scare me anymore, Sophia. I've got nothing left to lose thanks to you. You lost everything because of your own choices. I just refuse to be destroyed along with you. My children don't even know who I am, Julian continued, his voice rising. You've poisoned them against me, stolen years of their lives from me. Your children don't know you because you abandoned them for another woman and then went to prison for being a criminal. Those were your choices, not mine. I'm their father. Julian shouted. I have rights. You had rights. You gave them up when you chose crime over your family. The courts have terminated your parental rights permanently. The silence on the other end was more frightening than Julian's shouting had been. Julian? Sophia said. You think you've won, he said finally, his voice deadly quiet. You think your lawyers and your restraining orders and your new boyfriend can protect you. But I've had 5 years to think about this, Sophia. 5 years to plan. And I've had 5 years to build a life where you're irrelevant, Sophia replied. You're a stranger to your children, a criminal to the courts, and a failure to everyone who ever trusted you. You have no power here. We'll see about that. The line went dead. Tom had finished with 911 and was already checking the security system. Police are on their way. The security company is sending additional patrols. Sophia, I want you and the children upstairs while I check the perimeter. But even as they waited for the police, Sophia felt something unexpected. Not fear, but pity. Julian had spent 5 years in prison nurturing his anger instead of addressing his problems. He'd emerged from incarceration with the same entitlement and blame shifting that had led to his crimes in the first place. He'd learned nothing, grown not at all, and was now throwing away whatever chance he might have had at rebuilding his life. Meanwhile, Sophia had spent those same 5 years becoming stronger, more successful, and happier than she'd ever been. She'd built a business, raised amazing children, and found love with a man who valued integrity over profit and family over ego. Julian thought he was coming back to reclaim what was his. What he didn't realize was that he'd never owned any of it in the first place. Love, respect, and family weren't possessions to be reclaimed, they were gifts that had to be earned every day. And Julian had stopped earning them long before he'd walked away with Victoria at that airport. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found no sign of Julian. But they did find evidence that he'd been watching the house cigarette butts near the back fence and footprints in the flower bed beneath the children's bedroom window. He's escalating, the detective explained to Sophia and Tom. The phone call, the surveillance, the implied threats, this is a pattern we see with obsessive ex-spouses. It usually gets worse before it gets better. What's your recommendation? Tom asked. Increase security, consider temporary relocation, and be prepared for this to escalate quickly. Men like Julian Bennett don't usually stop with phone calls and surveillance. That night, after the children were safely asleep and additional security measures were in place, Sophia and Tom sat on their couch planning their response to Julian's threats. We could go to my cabin in Colorado, Tom suggested. Stay there until the police find him. No, Sophia said firmly. I'm not running from Julian again. I'm not uprooting the children's lives because their biological father can't accept reality. Sophia, this isn't about pride. This is about safety. It's about more than safety, Tom. It's about showing Camden and Charlotte that when someone tries to intimidate you, you don't hide. You stand your ground and let the system work. Tom studied her face in the lamplight. You're not afraid of him, are you? Sophia considered the question. I'm cautious. I'm protective of the children. But am I afraid of Julian? No. He's a broken man who's destroyed his own life and is trying to blame everyone else for his choices. He can't hurt me anymore because I don't need anything from him. I don't need his love, his approval, his money, or his presence in our lives. What if he tries to hurt you physically? Then he'll go back to prison for the rest of his life, and the children will grow up knowing their mother was strong enough to protect them from anyone, even their own father. Tom pulled her closer. I love how strong you are. But I also love you too much to let anything happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to me, Sophia said with quiet confidence. Julian had his chance to destroy me 5 years ago. He failed then and he'll fail now. The difference is that this time, I know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. As if to prove her point, Sophia's phone buzzed with a message from her business manager. Another major client had signed on, bringing her company's annual revenue to over $2 million. While Julian was hiding in shadows and making threatening phone calls, Sophia was building an empire. While he was breaking the law and burning bridges, she was creating a legacy of strength and success for her children. Julian thought this was his comeback story. What he didn't realize was that it was actually Sophia's victory lap. The woman he'd discarded at the airport had become everything he'd pretended to be: successful, respected, and truly powerful. And she was just getting started.